The year is 1974. 3 miles beneath the crushing weight of the Pacific Ocean, a giant mechanical claw is about to attempt the impossible. The CIA is trying to steal a Soviet nuclear submarine right from under the Kremlin's nose. This isn't a movie. This is the most expensive heist in human history. Imagine a grave 3 miles deep, a tomb of steel, holding nuclear fire and the frozen remains of 98 men. Now imagine trying to rob that grave in total silence, while your greatest enemy watches from a few hundred yards away. In 1974, the United States didn't just imagine it. They spent nearly $4 billion in today as money to build a mechanical monster that could reach into the abyss. This is the story of Project Azorian, a mission so audacious, so technically impossible, that even today, the CIA can neither confirm nor deny the full extent of its secrets. To understand the sheer madness of Project Azorian, we have to go back to the height of the Cold War. The year 1968 was a turning point. The world was a chessboard, and every move made by the United States and the Soviet Union was a step toward or away from nuclear annihilation. In this atmosphere of extreme paranoia, the ocean was the ultimate battlefield. Silent, hidden, and deadly, nuclear submarines were the kings of this domain. They were the ultimate deterrent, carrying the power to end civilization while remaining invisible beneath the waves. The date was February 24, 1968. A Soviet Golf II class submarine, designated K-129, slipped out of its port in the Kamchatka Peninsula. It was a formidable vessel, nearly 330 feet long, carrying 3 R-21 ballistic missiles. Each missile was armed with a 1 megaton nuclear warhead power, enough to vaporize any major American city. Its mission was a routine combat patrol in the North Pacific, a silent hunter meant to be a constant, unseen threat to the Western world. But somewhere near the 40th parallel, the silence became permanent. For reasons that are still debated by historians today, whether it was an internal explosion in the battery compartment, a mechanical failure, or a collision, the K-129 suffered a catastrophic event. It plummeted through the water column, descending nearly 16,500 feet until it slammed into the abyssal plain. The impact was so violent it shattered parts of the hull, creating a debris field in one of the deepest and most desolate parts of the Pacific. The Soviet Navy launched a massive search operation. Dozens of ships and aircraft crisscrossed the Pacific for 2 months. But they were searching in the wrong place. Their navigation logs and communication protocols had failed them. They had lost their sub, and with it, their most guarded nuclear secrets. Eventually, Moscow gave up. They declared the K-129 lost with all hands and assumed no one would ever find it. They believed the deep ocean was a perfect fault. While the Kremlin was blind, the Pentagon was listening. For years, the United States had been building SOSUS, the sound surveillance system. This was a globe-spanning network of underwater hydrophones, secret microphones anchored to the sea floor, designed to track the acoustic signatures of Soviet vessels. On that night in March, those microphones caught a specific, haunting sound, the sharp, metallic crack of a submarine hull imploding under the unthinkable pressure of the deep ocean. Using complex triangulation and mathematical modeling, the U.S. Navy didn't just have a general area. They had a bullseye in the middle of the vast Pacific. They knew exactly where the K-129 lay, sitting in the dark, 3 miles down. It was a depth that everyone in the naval world considered a dead zone, a place where no human-made object could ever be recovered. But to the CIA, the dead zone looked like an opportunity. The Navy initially looked at the site and walked away, deeming it an engineering impossibility. But the CIA saw something else, a gold mine of intelligence. If they could get that submarine, they would have the Soviet codebooks, the encryption machines that would allow the U.S. to read Moscow's secret messages, and the design of the nuclear warheads themselves. Richard Helms, then director of the CIA, authorized a task force to figure out how to do it. They called it Project Azorian. The plan they came up with was so bold, it sounded like science fiction. They wouldn't just visit the wreck. They would build a massive ship capable of lifting the entire 2,000-ton submarine all the way to the surface. But how do you build a 600-foot ship in plain sight without the Soviets realizing you're building a crane for their lost sub? You need a cover story that is bigger than life. You need a legend. The CIA needed a face for their project, someone whose wealth and eccentricity could explain away a massive secret industrial project. They found that man in Howard Hughes, the world's most famous and reclusive billionaire. The CIA approached Hughes with a proposition. Let us use your name. To the world, it was announced that Global Marine, a company associated with Hughes, was embarking on a revolutionary new venture. They were going to mine manganese nodules from the ocean floor. It was the perfect capitalist cover. Everyone believed that a man as rich and visionary as Hughes would naturally want to own the minerals at the bottom of the ocean. The media buzzed with stories of this futuristic mining ship that would make Hughes even richer. While the public looked at the ship as a symbol of American innovation, the CIA looked at it as an $800 million Trojan horse. The Soviets were curious, but they didn't suspect a thing. As the Glomar Explorer finally set sail for the target site in July 1974, a heavy moral weight hung over the crew. They weren't just recovery experts. They were, in many ways, grave robbers. Below them lay the final resting place of 98 Soviet sailors-men who had families, children, and lives. If the mission succeeded, they would be disturbing a mass grave for the sake of Cold War secrets. If they were caught, the international fallout could be catastrophic, potentially triggering a direct military conflict. Was it worth it? Construction of the Hughes Glomar Explorer was a feat of engineering. 619 feet long and weighing 63,000 tons, it was a beast. But its most incredible feature was hidden beneath the waterline. Inside the hull was a massive open bay, known as the Moon Pool. It was a cavernous space with huge sliding doors at the bottom. The idea was to lower a capture vehicle through this pool, grab the submarine, and pull it directly into the ship's belly, hidden from any passing eyes. To keep the ship perfectly still over the wreck site, 3 miles above, they developed a revolutionary dynamic positioning system. Using multiple thrusters controlled by a computer, the ship could stay within a few feet of its target, despite shifting currents and heavy seas. The crew wasn't just sailors. They were some of the most advanced technical minds the U.S. had to offer. The hand that would grab the submarine was a massive mechanical claw nicknamed Clementine. This capture vehicle was a monstrous structure of high-strength steel, designed to fit the exact contours of the K-129's hull. It looked like something from a nightmare, huge rusted steel fingers waiting to close around its prey. To lower it, the CIA didn't use cables. They used a pipe string. They would screw together 60-foot sections of heavy steel pipe, one by one, creating a vertical line 3 miles long. The sheer weight of the pipe string alone was over 7 million pounds. Every single joint had to be perfect. If even one thread failed, Clementine, the pipe, and the mission would be lost to the abyss forever. The tension on the ship was palpable as each new section of pipe was added, reaching deeper into the dark. When the Glomar Explorer arrived at the coordinates, they weren't alone for long. A Soviet tugboat and later a sophisticated intelligence-gathering vessel began to circle the Glomar. They flew helicopters so low over the deck that the American crew could see the pilots' faces. To maintain the mining cover, the Americans had to put on a show. They threw scrap metal and rocks into the moon pool to create the sound of mining. On the deck, crew members wore civilian clothes, played volleyball, and sunbathed, acting like bored oil workers. It was a surreal scene, men pretending to be on a relaxed commercial contract, while just a few feet below them, Top-secret CIA technicians were operating a nuclear recovery mission in total silence. The psychological pressure was unbearable. They were one slip away from an international incident. The process of lowering the claw took nearly a month. One pipe at a time. 60 feet, then another 60 feet. 100 pipes, then 200. In the control room, the air was thick with the smell of hydraulic fluid and nervous sweat. Technicians watched grainy, low-light sonar and camera feeds. The pressure at 16,500 feet is over 7,000 pounds per square inch, enough to crush a regular submarine like a soda can. Finally, the lights of Clementine illuminated the seabed. There it was, the K-129, a ghost of the Cold War, half buried in the fine silt of the abyssal plain. It looked small and fragile in the vastness of the deep. With delicate precision, the operators maneuvered the massive claw. The steel fingers slowly opened and descended over the hull. Contact, a voice whispered. The claw locked on. The heist had begun. The lift was agonizingly slow. For several days, the pipe string groaned as it pulled the 2,000-ton sub toward the surface. Every creak of the metal resonated through the Glomar Explorer. Inch by inch, the K-129 was being dragged from its grave. They had reached the halfway mark, about 9,000 feet deep. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. The atmosphere was one of cautious victory. Suddenly, a violent shudder ran through the entire ship. A massive structural failure occurred in one of the claw's steel arms. A loud bang echoed through the hull like a cannon shot. Under the immense stress, 3 of the claw's fingers snapped. In the pitch-black darkness of the deep, the K-129 began to slide out of the broken grip. It was a nightmare scenario. With a sickening groan of metal, 2/3 of the submarine, the section containing the missiles, the codebooks, and the command center broke off and plummeted back down. It fell for miles, spinning and breaking apart until it smashed into 1,000 pieces on the ocean floor. The primary mission objectives were gone in an instant. Years of work and millions of dollars disappeared into the silt. The crew was devastated. All they had left in the claw was the forward section, the bow. But as they brought that section into the moon pool and drained the water, they realized they hadn't just recovered steel. Among the twisted wreckage and silt were the remains of 6 Soviet sailors. Even in the heat of the Cold War, a deep sense of solemn duty took over the ship. These were not just the enemy anymore. These were fellow mariners who had suffered a terrible death. The CIA officers, many of whom were former military, insisted on giving these men a proper burial. They carefully recovered the bodies and prepared them for their final journey. It was a moment where the cold calculations of intelligence gave way to the ancient laws of the sea. They were sailors, and they deserved to be honored. Under the cover of a Pacific sunset, the Glomar Explorer held a funeral that would remain a secret for decades. The 6 sailors were draped in the Soviet flag. A CIA chaplain performed the service in both English and Russian. As the Soviet national anthem was played over the ship's speakers, the bodies were committed to the deep with full military honors. The CIA filmed the entire ceremony for the record. The Glomar Explorer returned to port, and for a year, the secret held. The CIA claimed the mining mission was a moderate success. But a secret involving thousands of people and nearly $1 billion is hard to keep. In early 1975, the legendary investigative journalist Seymour Hersh and the Los Angeles Times began to uncover the truth. Someone had talked. The elaborate Howard Hughes cover story began to fall apart. This crisis led to the birth of one of the most famous phrases in legal history. When asked for documents, the CIA drafted a response that would become their ultimate shield. They stated, "We can neither confirm nor deny that the requested information exists." This became known as the Glomar response. It was a brilliant legal maneuver that allowed the government to stay silent without confirming the truth. It is a silent monument to the Cold War, a time when two empires were willing to reach into the very gates of hell for a single advantage. Some secrets are worth billions. Others are destined to remain buried forever in the crushing dark.